Jesse.
I'm glad you brought up money because that's so important. There was someone that mentioned in the documentary that I think it was Andrea Zoff that said that is it true that this state, Chicago, gets less support from
No,
the state of Illinois
is the state that's, I think, now dropped to like 49th or 50th in the nation in terms of amount of support it gives to schools. So it's the minority share. We're locally funded, somewhere upwards of 60-something% based on our local property taxes here. And, you know, we can't tax we'll tax every citizen out of Chicago if we have to raise them out
Right.
to get to the amount that we really, really need. So we would need a greater proportion of that amount of funding to come from the state so that we can do more, because frankly, we do need more. You know, certain children in certain communities need more supports than we can provide today. And this was one of the things that drove, how do we concentrate those supports by, instead of putting roofs on 100-year-old buildings that are half empty, you know, we can put those into technology that'll support children, to safety programs that'll support children, to make sure there's additional personnel that'll support children. And just remembering, in some cases where the personnel isn't there, you know, we've gone to a student-based budgeting system for two reasons. One, to give the autonomy to the principal and the local school council to decide how do they want to spend their money at the school level, so it's equitable on a per-student basis. The funding follows the student. But also, I mean, if we had an abundance of funds, we probably wouldn't have gone to that. It's also a rationing system because, frankly, we are cash-strapped and we're looking at a $1 billion deficit because we have this gaping pension hole. So it's challenging times, and that's the other part that's driving a lot of these things, that we simply don't have enough funds to do the job that we need to do for our students today.
So
I think if the mayor Daley went out and, along with the Commercial Club of Chicago, was able to create the Renaissance School Funds, which raise millions and millions of dollars for schools, he can do the same thing to renovate and revitalize neighborhood public schools here. So why aren't we going out and doing the same things we do for charter schools in the case of Renaissance School Fund? Why aren't we doing those same things to fund the school buildings that we have now?
Jesse,
mean,
you take that one?
We're talking, you notice I said $1 billion. We have a $5 billion operating budget, a little bit more in capital that gets us up to somewhere near $6 billion. And you know, a few $1 million is not going to be the long-term solution. The long-term solution is to have systemic reforms to how we fund schools in Illinois, not have Chicagoans, frankly, not have Chicagoans pay into two pension systems. In Chicago, we fund our own Chicago teacher retirement system, plus we also pay into the TRS, the teacher retirement system in Illinois. We're funding the pensions of teachers in Carbondale and Danville. And so, no, that doesn't go to Goldman Sachs, but it does go to the pensions of those retired teachers, and so that has to get reformed. We need to stop funding all schools, frankly, based on your zip code and where your property taxes can sustain you, so that we don't have differentials in rural Southern Illinois where those schools can spend about $6,000-7,000 per student to the North Shore where they can spend $23,000 per student. We shouldn't have that differential.
We have a new governor, and he has said he's going to. You know, he has said in so many words that he wants to be the education governor. That's his pet topic. What, Jesse, is there been some conversation at the board in terms of a lobbying strategy, a legislative strategy to go down to Springfield and get some increased resources?
If you heard Mayor Emanuel when he mentioned an education platform recently, that was one of the points he mentioned, is that, you know, really holding the governor true to his word that he said he would put more funds into public education. I can say I did not vote for the man, but I wish him all the best in that regard, because we desperately need it. We've always needed it in Illinois. We've got to reform the way we fund our schools, get away from property taxes. It's got to be based on the income taxes, and hopefully get to a progressive income tax someday in Illinois. And we can better adequately fund all schools across the entire state.
Jitu.
Okay. So I think that I agree that there is a budget crisis. But I think the bigger crisis within Chicago Public Schools is a priority crisis. You know, yes, it's a $5 billion budget, but hundreds of millions of dollars have been diverted towards this plan for making Chicago Public Schools as close to a portfolio district as you can get. Office of Innovation, Office of New Schools, Office of Talent Development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, hundreds of millions of dollars have been diverted.
We have actually, since the last 3 years, 8 months that we've been there, $750 million is taken out of the central office. Go check the numbers. That is the verifiable fact.
Taken out of the central
office operations, yes.
You mean in terms of cuts?
But let me, I mean, what I'm raising is that CPS, wherever the office is now, it used to be 125 South Clark, but wherever the office is now, the way that they operate.
Sears. It used to be Sears.
Okay, their education agenda is skewed towards privatization. So what they've done within their structure, their offices are designed to make sure that we are bringing in people that have been charter school principals, charter school administrators, people. You're sitting in front of people when your schools are about to close that was from the charter school network in San Diego, California. People who have no connection to the city of Chicago. Your network chiefs change every 2 years.
So your point is that this priority is becoming more toward the privatization charter school.
So let me say this, because I think everybody is, having the chance to say what they have to say. I just want to. So the issue is that when Mayor Rahm Emanuel was claiming that this was about utilization, and they closed 47 to 50 schools, then they cut $60 million away from neighborhood schools, and then in the blink of an eye gave $68 million to charter schools. But now, I am not anti-charter school as centers of innovation. I am anti-charter school as the direction of an entire district. So what do we know now? We know that 75% of charter schools either perform at the same level or worse than neighborhood public schools. We know that since 2000...
The research is mixed on charter schools.
Since 2002...
Depends on what study you look at.
Since 2002, and this is Chicago Catalyst, only 18% of the schools that have replaced closed schools perform well. This is December 7th, 2011. We know this, despite the fact they can pick the children they want and kick out the ones they don't. Kick out the ones they don't. So the question is, if you have 15 years of failed policies, but what you haven't done is invested in the wisdom that exists in our neighborhood, looked at what works around the country, look at what works around the world. I lifted up Cincinnati as an example. It's not a silver bullet, but they have closed the opportunity gap in Cincinnati. The college attendance rate for African-American students has skyrocketed over a 12-year process of implementing community schools. So we have sat down with Chicago Public Schools and said, let's do sustainable community schools. Good schools are not a mystery.
Yeah, okay.
We seem to act as if educating African American children and Latino children is this huge undertaking that maybe somehow will inspire them, and maybe if we burn some pixie dust, they'll learn. No, good. If you look,
Jitu, let him respond. You made a couple of really important points here.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I mean, you can finish
Jesse.
if you want.
First of all,
let me just say this real quick, because I'm not trying to dominate.
you are trying to dominate, and we need to move on so we get to the conversation.
Well, then I'll stop.
Okay. Let Jesse have a chance to respond to the points you made. Is this data? I mean, is it the comparisons he's making? Is the data correct?
And I almost forgot my point. I was listening to so many things. But the point is that first of all, we've now closed charter schools in this last 3 years, 8 months that I've been on the board. That hadn't been done before. Is that the strategy to get us to it's
how many of you closed over what period of time?
It's just been 2 over the 3 years, 8 months. They've never been closed before. And there's a watch list. And there's a process now, just like every other school. And that wasn't the case anymore. Nobody believes that they're a panacea or a silver bullet. But there's some very good performing charter schools. And it's as chosen, some families want those options. As we saw in the data here, parents want choices. It's that their tax dollars
Parents
too.
want stability, Jesse.
They want that too, and if they can find it as well.
I think they want all.
They want stability,
And so, we're holding them to the same standards we're now holding everybody else. You've seen a report of measures.
Parents in Lincoln Park don't have the choice of charter schools. Parents that live in Lakeview don't have the choice of charter
They
schools.
so choose.
So parents are not choosing that. What happens is when you throw a grenade in a neighborhood school, parents, and I'm sorry, I've been organizing in these communities over 20 years. This is not intellectual to me. So
We're not trying to have intellectual conversation,
So-
but we're trying to get
Yes,
through,
ma'am.
have a conversation,
Yes, ma'am.
okay?
Okay.
You made your point. Elaine, you wanted to say something about research.
Oh, I think
Where's the love?
my mic working.
No, why don't you share? Would you share your mic with her, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think you were looking to me to ask about the research that's been done. I hear accusations all the time, both for and against charter schools. I mean, I hear claims that are being made about charter schools doing miraculous things, and I also hear, there have also been people who have put out their own data analysis to say charter schools are doing worse, on average than other schools. And honestly, at this point, we don't have good research out there that tells us how the charter schools are doing. One thing we do know, there have been studies in the past that have been good that have shown, on average, charter schools in Chicago aren't doing any better or worse than other schools. And we see that actually across the country. On average, everywhere you look, on average, charter schools are doing about the same as the neighborhood schools. However, there's huge variation. I mean, there's just huge differences across charter schools, just like there are huge differences across non-charter schools.
But that brings us right back around to the beginning of our conversation. Parents what the best for their children.
Well, and it is. And I do say, I have to caution and say, a lot of the best research that's been done was done, not in the last 5 years or so in Chicago, the last 5 or 10 years, and now we have way more charter schools than we ever did. So I think we do need to look again to say, how good are the charter schools,
frankly,
right?
now-
And how bad are
think
the
And
it's
charter
now
also-
we're
it's
finally
important-
holding
excuse me,
Charles
I think also
accountable.
it's important to note out the blanket statements that do exist about charter schools. One, that they have much wider teaching force and a higher turnover rate than neighborhood schools. I think we need to identify that they accept less English language learners than neighborhood schools. I think we need to identify the fact that they accept less special education students than neighborhood schools do. And I believe those are blanket statements that have been proven by research.
Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
I'm asking.
Yes,
I'm
it's
asking the
true.
researcher here.
And,
Yeah,
well,
I
and on
think we
the
actually have
ELLs
to make sure we're always
and on
doing
the ELL
apples.
front,
What?
frankly, and I was very supportive, and frankly, a few of my friends in the charter community weren't too thrilled that, there was a law passed in Illinois recently that now makes sure that the school code, as it applies to providing those services to ELL students, they must comply. And they fought it. They fought against the State Board of Education that pushed it, and myself, who was a supporter of that bill that the governor signed into law. So we are holding folks accountable to this.
Okay.
Everybody gets the same high standards.
Elaine, and go ahead. You want to make your one
Yeah,
more
I
point?
have to say there are a lot of accusations that are out there, and I think probably there's always truth to some things, and then there's always more to the story than you think. Just like with school closings, and we didn't see all the terrible, the worst fears come true, but we also didn't see.
You didn't see them because
Well-
you took a close eye to it. But we seen
Well, we
it.
saw it for families,
Right,
yeah.
girl, we seen it.
Yeah.
Up close and personal. Open your eyes and you will too.
I'm not saying
I'm
it-
sorry, but this
You know
is
what?
getting
You know what?
ridiculous.
We can stop the
This is
conversation.
getting
We can
ridiculous.
stop
Stop
the.
it then. Stop it. The same way you've been stopping Jitu from talking, we'll stop it. That's right. Be fair all the way around. Be fair all the way around.
You done?
I mean,
I was just about to go to the audience so that people could
good. 'cause
weigh
I
in.
got questions to ask.
Okay.